Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight we are venturing into the oldest mountains in America, where the fog rolls thick through the hollows and the trees remember everything. The Appalachian wilderness has cradled secrets for centuries, from vanished souls to crimes that time refuses to bury, from unexplained horrors that defy every rational thought. These 10 accounts will take you deep into those forgotten places where help is miles away and something waits in the darkness. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of the Appalachian deep woods, where civilization ends and terror begins. I grew up in western North Carolina, in a small mountain town where fog clung to the streets like something alive. When I turned 24, I started trail mapping for a small hiking blog. Basically, I hiked remote areas no one cared about and documented them. In October, I hiked a forgotten ridge trail the locals called Widow's Shelf. The moment I stepped out of my truck, something felt wrong. Trees leaned in unnaturally, blocking sunlight. The forest was too quiet. No insects, no wind, just silence, the kind that presses on your eardrums. A mile in, I started feeling watched. I told myself it was just the stillness messing with me, until I reached a section where the trees opened just enough to reveal a cliff. And she was standing on it. A woman in a long dress, facing the forest, still, completely still. I froze, thinking maybe another hiker. Then she turned, not her body, just her head, and she stared directly at me. I stumbled back, heart racing, nearly slipping on loose stone. When I looked again, she was gone. I don't remember running, but I remember the feeling. She didn't walk away. She vanished. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the fog, an illusion. But as I headed back down the ridge, I kept hearing soft crunching behind me. Footsteps, light, deliberate, matching my pace. I stopped. They stopped. I walked faster. They walked faster. The trail narrowed between two crooked trees, and I swear I felt the temperature drop 10 degrees. My breath came out in a foggy burst, even though it wasn't that cold. The air smelled like wet soil and iron. I pulled out my phone to use the camera as a rear view. In the reflection, far down the trail, was a faint shape, pale, feminine, standing motionless. I spun around. Nothing. A branch cracked right beside me. My heart lunged into my throat. "Hello?" I called, voice shaking. "Anyone there?" Silence. Then, whispering, right behind my ear. Not words, just the sound of breath forming them. I bolted. Branches whipped my face as I sprinted through the trail, lungs burning. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere else. The forest seemed alive, pushing me, funneling me toward the exit. I stumbled into the clearing by the parking area, gasping for air. My truck was parked exactly where I left it. But there, on the dusty back window, were fingerprints. Long, thin, and dragged downward. 2 days later, I convinced myself I imagined the whole thing. Sleep deprivation, paranoia. Then I made mistake number 2. I went back. I wanted proof or closure. This time I brought a GoPro and a flashlight, even though it was still daylight. The air on the ridge felt heavier than before. Wrong. Like the forest recognized me. About halfway up the trail, I saw something white tied to a branch. Fabric. No, not fabric. A strip of dress. Weather-beaten and torn. My stomach dropped. I lifted it carefully. That's when I heard it. A woman sobbing. Deep, broken sobs that echoed through the trees. I turned slowly, scanning every direction. Nothing. But the crying grew louder, got closer. Suddenly, a voice, right behind me, whispered, "Don't leave me." I whipped around, flashlight strobing through the trees. Nothing. Again, I took one step backward, and my foot landed on something soft. When I looked down, there were bare footprints in the mud, pointed toward me. Fresh, still filling with water, I ran so hard I thought my chest might rip open. When I finally reached my truck, I locked myself inside and sat shaking, staring into the tree line. That's when I saw her again. Closer, too close, standing perfectly still and smiling. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because my bedroom window kept tapping. Not from wind, from knocking. 3 taps. Pause, 3 taps again. I eventually got up and pulled the curtain. Nothing, until lightning flashed. For a single white frame, I saw her reflection in the glass, standing behind me. I spun around, no one there. The power went out, throwing my house into a black void. I grabbed my flashlight, trying to slow my breathing. My pulse thundered. Then, krrryak. A floorboard in the hallway shifted. I wasn't alone. I aimed the flashlight. At the end of the hallway stood a silhouette, long, unmoving, head tilted too far to one side. The air turned suffocatingly cold. I whispered, "Leave me alone." She took a step. I stumbled backward into my room and slammed the door shut, pressing my weight against it. Her footsteps dragged across the wood, slow and uneven, like bones scraping the floor. Then she spoke, voice close to the door. "You came back for me." I held my breath. Silence. When I finally opened the door, shaking, the hallway was empty. But on the floor, carved into the wood, were 3 words. "Don't look back." I told myself the hallucinations came from lack of sleep and stress. Then I spoke to an old local man at a gas station. When I mentioned the ridge, his face went pale. "You saw her, didn't you?" I didn't answer. He sighed. Widow's Shelf isn't a hiking trail. It was where they used to take unwanted people. During the Depression, if someone became a burden, families left them there. My throat tightened. "Left them?" He nodded. "To die?" He leaned closer. "Some say one woman never left. She waits on that cliff, watching for anyone who tries to leave her behind." My chest tightened. "She follows the ones who look at her face." I froze. He stared into me, voice low. "Tell me, did you look at her?" I didn't answer, because I had. And she had smiled. I knew what I had to do. Every horror instinct screamed no, but every logical part of me whispered, "You need closure. End it where it began." I returned to Widow's Shelf at sunrise, carrying only a flashlight and recording equipment. The forest felt different, almost eager, like it knew. When I reached the cliff, the fog parted. She was there, facing the drop. Slowly, she turned. This time, I didn't run. I forced myself to speak. "What do you want?" Her voice cracked, like dried leaves breaking. "Don't forget me." Wind roared suddenly, swallowing her words. Her eyes widened with pain, desperation. "Stay. Please." For the first time, I felt something other than fear. She wasn't hunting me. She was begging. I whispered, trembling, "I'm sorry." She reached toward me, hands shaking. And for a moment, her face softened. Human. Broken. Then, like ash and wind, she dissolved. The fog swallowed her. I should have left. But the forest had other plans. As soon as she vanished, the trees began groaning, like something massive pushed against them. The fog thickened, turning the forest into a blind labyrinth. Then I heard it. Running. Not mine. Something large barreling through the woods. I sprinted down the trail. Branches clawed my arms. My legs burned. I didn't dare look back, not after what she carved into my floor. Don't look back, but curiosity killed my self-control. I turned, and what I saw wasn't the woman. It was something wearing her shape. Tall, distorted, moving with sickening speed, its face stretched, its arms too long. I ran harder, lungs on fire, vision tunneling. The trail split into two. Left, familiar. Right, unknown. I chose left. A scream ripped through the forest. Rage, loss, hunger. Branches shattered behind me. I burst into daylight and didn't stop running until I reached my truck. I slammed the door and looked toward the ridge. The tree line shifted. Something was standing there, watching. Weeks passed. I moved apartments, changed my number, quit hiking, but she wasn't done. Every night, a woman cried outside my window. Soft at first, then louder, then choking, desperate. One night, I snapped. I opened the window and yelled into the darkness, "What do you want from me?" The crying stopped. Silence. Then a whisper, right in my ear. You looked back. My house filled with wind, papers flying, lights flickering. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. I ran to the front door, ready to escape, but the door was already open. Standing outside, under the porch light, was the woman. Head tilted, eyes hollow, dress torn. But her expression wasn't angry. It was hopeless. She mouthed something. 3 words. "Don't leave me." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "I can't stay." She blinked and vanished, leaving only a trail of wet footprints leading into the woods. I realized something horrible. She followed me, not because she wanted to hurt me, but because I was the only person who ever came back. I drove to the ridge one last time. Rain hammered the windshield, lightning flashing over the mountains. I stepped out, soaked instantly, and shouted into the storm, "I remember you." The wind stopped. Fog swirled in front of me, twisting until a shape appeared, her shape. She reached toward me, but hesitated. Afraid I'd run again, I stepped closer. "You're not forgotten." Her expression changed. Relief and sorrow tangled together. The world went silent. Then her form collapsed into mist and drifted into the trees like smoke. It was over. Or so I thought. 3 months later, I moved across the country. New job, new life, no more hikes. One night, I went to take out trash behind my apartment building. The alley was empty, lit by a flickering street lamp. I set the trash bag down and turned to go inside. Then I froze. In the mud beside the dumpster were bare footprints. Long, thin, pointed toward my door. A cold breeze brushed my neck. And from behind me, a whisper, "Remember me?" I dropped the trash bag and ran. Locked my door. Sat on the floor shaking. I don't go outside at night anymore. Sometimes I wake to the sound of weeping. Far away. Sometimes closer. Sometimes right outside my door. She never wanted vengeance. She only wanted someone who wouldn't leave her behind. And she chose me. I used to explore ghost towns for a living, photographing abandoned places and writing articles for small travel magazines. When I heard about a forgotten coal town deep in the Appalachian mountains, a place the locals refused to talk about, I knew I had to see it for myself. The town was called Harlan Ridge. Population 0. Everyone left in 1984 when the mine shut down after a cave-in killed 12 workers. The government closed the area, citing instability. But some locals hinted at other reasons. People weren't just dying underground, the gas station clerk told me. They were dying above it too. The drive up the mountain was long and silent. The air felt heavy, thick with humidity and the smell of rust. After another mile, dense fog rolled in, swallowing the road. My GPS lost signal, leaving me with only a faded map and instinct. When I finally reached the entrance, I saw a rusted metal sign, Harlan Ridge, do not enter. I ignored it. The town looked frozen in time. Stores with smashed windows, houses half collapsed, streetlights strangled by ivy. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt expectant, like something had been waiting years for someone to return. As I unpacked my camera gear, movement caught my eye. A man stood in an upstairs window of the old general store, watching me, not moving, not blinking, just staring. I raised my camera, zooming in on the window where the man stood. He wore an old miner's uniform, the kind from the 1970s, faded navy coveralls, and a rusted helmet light. The beam of the light wasn't on, yet I could still make out his eyes. They were dull, empty, like he hadn't blinked in decades. Before I could take the picture, he stepped back into darkness. I told myself it was probably another explorer or squatter, but my chest tightened as I walked up the broken main street. Every structure groaned under years of neglect. Shattered glass popped beneath my boots. The air smelled like coal dust and mildew. A grocery cart lay on its side in the middle of the road, rusted solid. A pair of children's rain boots sat beside it, full of rainwater. The stillness unnerved me. Even abandoned towns usually had birds, insects, some sign of life. Here there was nothing. As I approached the general store, I noticed the door wasn't closed. It was slightly open, just enough for someone to be watching from inside. My camera bag suddenly felt too loud, every zipper echoing against the empty buildings. From inside the store, a voice rasped. "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, heart stuttering. No one was there. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The store smelled like wet cardboard and decaying wood. Shelves leaned sideways, products still on them, canned beans, soup, and dust-covered cereal boxes from the early 80s. A dented shopping basket lay on the floor, as if someone dropped it mid-step. I slowly made my way toward the stairs leading to the second floor where I'd seen him. Each step creaked loudly, echoing through the hollow building. Halfway up, I noticed something carved into the railing. "Don't go upstairs," and the carving looked recent. Sharp, desperate. I ignored it. At the top, I froze. There were footprints in the dust, large, booted, coal-stained footprints, but only going one direction. To the window, none returning. My throat tightened. I turned to leave, but a hand slammed onto my shoulder. Ice shot through my veins. I spun around, swinging my flashlight. Nothing. The air pressed in around me, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was my own breathing. Too fast, too loud. As I backed down the stairs, the floorboards groaned again, like someone much heavier was descending with me. But no one was there. When I reached the bottom, I saw it. Fresh coal dust footprints, right behind mine. Outside, fog had thickened, choking the streets. I followed the footprints down the road, as if hypnotized. They led past boarded homes and toppled street signs to the far end of town where the land dipped. That's when I saw it. The mine entrance. Rebar fencing surrounded it, twisted and broken. The wooden warning sign was splintered, lettering barely readable. "Keep out. Unsafe. Collapsed tunnels. Do not enter." Through the fence, I saw old mining rail tracks disappearing into blackness. A collapsed support beam hung like a crooked spine. But something else caught my eye. A lantern sat beside the entrance, lit. The flame flickered unnaturally, not disturbed by wind or movement. I crouched, reaching toward it, and the temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged. Behind me, gravel shifted. Slow footsteps approached. Slow, heavy, measured. I turned slowly, forcing my breath to stay steady. The miner stood 20 feet away. Same dull, staring eyes, same rusted helmet. But now, I could see his face clearly. Skin pale as wet paper, cheeks hollowed, coal dust embedded into his pores. He lifted one finger, not pointing at me, pointing toward the mine. My voice trembled. "You want me to go inside?" He didn't blink. I don't know why I listened. Maybe it was adrenaline, or fear, or some irrational need to prove the town's curse wrong. I squeezed through the broken fence, grabbing the lantern. The miner didn't follow. He simply watched as I crossed into the darkness. Inside, the mine swallowed sound. My breathing echoed back at me like mockery. The lantern cast a sickly yellow glow, revealing rusted track rails and rotting support beams. Water dripped from the ceiling, collecting into shallow pools along the path. 10 steps in, I felt it. The ground vibrating, not shaking, pulsing, like a heartbeat. The deeper I went, the clearer the sound became. Voices, whispers tangled with echoes of metal striking rock, men shouting orders, and beneath it all, a rhythmic tapping. Tap, 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 just like miners signaling each other through tunnels. I turned a corner and stopped breathing. There, in the lantern glow, were 12 helmets lined neatly along the floor. Each one cracked, dented, covered in dried mud and coal. The miner's boots appeared behind me, reflected in the metal surface of one helmet. I spun around. No one was there. But when I turned back toward the helmets, they were no longer empty. Every one of them had a decayed skull inside. The ground rumbled, not lightly this time. The tunnel quaked, showering dust and gravel from above. The beam above me cracked down the center, releasing a burst of coal and dirt. The mine was collapsing. I grabbed the lantern and sprinted toward the exit, stumbling over debris. The tapping turned into pounding, metal against rock, as if an army of ghosts worked deeper inside. Then I heard screaming, men yelling, begging. "We're still here. Don't seal the entrance. We're alive." Their voices echoed from every direction. A support beam snapped violently, slamming into the ground where I had been seconds earlier. The tunnel behind me took on a new sound, not rumbling, but running. Footsteps, fast, ragged, chasing me. I didn't look back. My lungs burned, my eyes stung with coal dust. The exit was only 30 feet away when the lantern extinguished. Pitch black, something grabbed my arm, fingers like frozen metal clamps. I jerked away and dove toward the faint outline of daylight. My shoulder hit open air as I tumbled onto wet gravel. I scrambled up and turned. The miner stood inside the tunnel, separated from me by fallen debris, no longer expressionless. Now he looked angry and betrayed. I staggered toward the main street, coughing coal dust. But the town had changed. Fog no longer drifted through slowly. It swarmed, curling around houses like living smoke. Streetlights flickered even though there was no power. Windows that had been empty earlier now had silhouettes inside them, all watching, not moving. The miner stepped out of the mine entrance as though nothing had collapsed. He began walking toward me, slow and heavy, boots grinding gravel. I ran to my truck. The door wouldn't open. My keys were gone. I patted every pocket. Nothing. My camera bag lay on the ground beside the general store's steps. the bag I had closed and zipped earlier. Someone had opened it. My keys were sitting neatly on top, as if placed there. My heart hammered. I snatched them, sprinted to the truck, and jammed the key into the ignition. The miner stood only yards away now. No expression, no breath, just that dead, empty stare. The truck roared to life. He reached the driver's side window and pressed one coal-dusted hand against the glass and left a perfect black handprint. I floored the gas pedal, tires skidding on wet gravel before catching grip. The fog swallowed everything. Headlights barely reaching 3 feet ahead. Buildings dissolved behind me into shapeless shadows. But no matter how far I drove, the road didn't end. It just kept winding. Left, right, left. Like I was circling the same stretch of town. I checked the odometer. I'd been driving 10 straight minutes. Impossible. The town wasn't that big. Then the radio turned on, even though the truck was too old to have automatic power. Static filled the speakers, followed by faint tapping. Not random tapping, the same tap, tap, tap from inside the mine. My hands shook against the wheel. A voice rose through the static, strained, echoing, broken. They sealed us in. Another voice joined, overlapping. Why didn't you help us? My breath caught. More voices, dozens, all screaming. Static exploded. The headlights flickered, then died. The truck rolled to a stop. When the lights flicked back on, the miner stood directly in front of the truck. Helmet light glowing, eyes hollow, coal dust dripping onto the hood. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared, letting the lantern glow reveal his expression. Not rage. Grief. He lifted his hand slowly and pointed toward the road behind me. I turned and realized why the road never ended. There was no exit. The towns looped endlessly, a trap, a burial ground. I rolled down the window, my voice breaking. What do you want from me? His cracked lips moved. Tell them. The fog around him shifted, revealing other shapes behind him, silhouettes of miners, faces twisted in pain and despair, coal dust clinging to their hollowed-out eyes. They weren't trying to hurt me. They wanted someone to know the truth. They were never rescued. They were buried alive. I nodded slowly, tears burning my eyes. I'll tell your story. The miner blinked for the first time, and then he dissolved into a cloud of coal dust. The fog thinned. The road ahead appeared. This time, I escaped. 3 weeks later, I submitted a full article with photos documenting Harlan Ridge. The editor rejected it, said the place never existed. According to the county records, the town was demolished after the cave-in. I tried finding it again. Hours of driving, nothing. The area where the road had been was now a sheet of trees. No buildings, no rubble, no sign of human existence. As if the town itself had erased its presence. That night, as I downloaded photos from my camera, one image stood out. I hadn't taken it, not on purpose. A photograph of me inside the mine, standing inches from the helmets, and behind me, the miner. Hand on my shoulder. His eyes weren't empty in the photo. They were pleading. And on the bottom of the image, written in coal-black smears, "We are still here." I deleted the file. It restored itself 5 seconds later. Now, every few nights, I hear tapping behind my bedroom wall. Tap, 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 like miners signaling from the other side. I don't explore abandoned places anymore. Some towns don't stay buried, some stories don't want to be forgotten, and some ghosts don't want to be alone. I grew up in a small Appalachian town where secrets travel faster than wind through the holler. and everyone claims to know someone who's seen something unexplainable in the woods. But I never believed the stories. Not until I moved into my grandfather's old hunting cabin last winter. He used to warn me about Birch Hollow, a deep stretch of forest behind the cabin that dipped into a narrow ravine. According to him, a man whistles out there. Don't ever whistle back. I had always assumed he was just trying to scare a kid into staying close to home. But after he passed, I inherited the cabin, and I needed a place to live. Rent-free, after losing my job. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses on your ears until your heartbeat feels loud. The first night, I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, staring into the tree line. The wind barely moved. Snow clung to the branches like it didn't want to fall. That's when I heard it. 3 slow notes, whistled from deep in the woods. Clear, soft, too deliberate to be wind. I froze, waiting for another sound. Nothing, just the whistle echoing in my skull. My grandpa's words came back like a warning from the grave. Never whistle back. The next morning, I convinced myself it had to be wind, or maybe a bird. I wasn't used to the isolation, so my brain was probably exaggerating things. After breakfast, I hiked toward Birch Hollow with my camera, thinking I'd prove to myself it was nothing. The trail was narrow and lined with skeletal trees. Snow crunched beneath my boots, and the air smelled like frozen pine and distant creek water. At the drop of the ravine, the forest shifted. The air felt heavier, colder. Something about the quiet felt artificial, like the woods were holding their breath. I reached the bottom where the hollow formed a narrow corridor. Dense pines blocked most of the sky, and even at noon, the ground was dim. My footsteps echoed in an unnatural way, like the sound was being absorbed and sent back slightly delayed. That's when I heard it again. 3 notes, slow, mocking, whistled from just beyond the bend. I held my breath, waiting. The whistle repeated, same rhythm, same pitch, as if someone was standing still and deliberately making sure I heard them. I finally called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" My voice sounded small. The woods went dead still. Then I heard a twig snap behind me. I spun around fast, slipping slightly on frost-coated leaves. Nothing. Just trees, dark, motionless, waiting. The snap hadn't sounded like falling ice or shifting branches. It sounded like a step. My heart thudded painfully. It's just a deer, I told myself. Or maybe a fox. But deer don't whistle. I started heading back toward the cabin, walking faster than I'd admit. The higher I climbed, the more my anxiety faded. By the time I reached the porch, I felt stupid for even being scared. That night, snow fell hard. Thick flakes drifted silently against the windows. I was reading in bed when I heard it again. Whistle, whistle, whistle. Closer this time. Not from the woods, from behind the cabin. My breath froze in my throat. I grabbed the flashlight, forced myself to the back door, and stepped onto the porch. The beam cut through the snowstorm, flakes swirling like ghosts in the light. "Hello?" I called out. No answer, only the sound of falling snow. But just before I shut the door, I saw them. Footprints in the fresh snow. Bare, human, leading straight toward the cabin and stopping at my back door. No prints leading away. I barely slept. Every creak of the cabin felt amplified. By morning, the storm had covered the footprints like nothing happened. I stared at the snow, thinking maybe I had imagined them. But I knew what I saw. That afternoon, I drove into town for supplies. At the gas station, an older man stocking firewood noticed my plates. "You in Grand Parsons' cabin?" he asked. Yeah. Why?" He inhaled slowly, like he regretted opening his mouth. "You hear anything strange out there?" I hesitated, whistling. His expression drained of color. He leaned in, voice low. "If you hear him whistle once, it means he sees you. If he whistles twice, it means he's close. If he whistles 3 times," he swallowed, "it means he wants you to answer." I felt sick. "How do you know that?" The man didn't blink. "Because my brother did. We never found him. When I left the store, he stopped me with one final warning. Whatever you do, don't whistle back." That night, I forced myself to stay awake. I kept the lights off to conserve power. I sat near the window with a blanket and a thermos of coffee. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2. Nothing. At 2:43 a.m., I heard it. Whistle. A single note, soft and deliberate. It wasn't from far away. It was somewhere near the porch. I crouched down below the window and held my breath. My heart hammered against my ribs. Through the glass, I saw motion. Something tall, pale, moving between the trees. I couldn't make out a face. Just a long, thin shape, like a person stretched wrong. Then, the second whistle came. Whistle, whistle. Slower this time. Closer, my whole body froze. I didn't dare look out the window again. My mind screamed to run, but my body refused to move. The cabin floor creaked. From the porch, something scraped slowly along the outside wall. Not claws, not an animal. Fingertips, dragging. "Come on," a voice whispered outside. Not loud, not even threatening, just eager. I bit down on my sleeve to keep myself from making noise. Then, silence. By sunrise, exhaustion hit me like a truck. As soon as the light filled the cabin, I ventured outside. Snow around the porch was disturbed, but not with footprints. It looked like someone had crouched or crawled, dragging something along the boards. My hands trembled as I searched for cell service. No signal. I packed my duffel bag, threw it into my truck, and drove. Fast. Halfway down the mountain road, the engine sputtered, then died. The fuel gauge was still full. The truck rolled to a stop beside a stretch of frozen woods. "No. No, no," I whispered, trying the ignition again. Something flashed in the mirror. A tall, thin figure stood behind the truck, not moving, just standing there. I locked the doors and fumbled for my phone. Still no service. The figure took one step forward, and then whistle, whistle, whistle. My blood turned to ice. I didn't think. I slammed the door open and sprinted into the woods. Every breath felt like knives in my lungs. Snow swallowed my footsteps as I ran downhill toward the hollow. Branches whipped my face. My legs burned. I didn't care. Behind me, the whistling shifted. It wasn't coming from one direction anymore. It echoed from everywhere. Whistle, whistle, whistle. I tripped over a fallen log and slid down a slope, landing hard at the bottom. Pain shot up my ankle. I looked up and froze. He stood at the top of the ridge, tall, wrong, too long in the limbs, head tilted like he couldn't understand what he was seeing. He raised a hand, slow, inviting, and pointed at me. Then he pressed 2 fingers to where his mouth should have been. Whistle. I scrambled backward and ducked behind rocks until night fell. I don't remember falling asleep. When I opened my eyes, the moon hung low, huge and yellow between the branches. My body was shaking from the cold. I knew I couldn't stay in the open. I forced myself to move, following the creek back toward the cabin. Hours passed. When the cabin finally came into view, relief washed over me. Until I saw the door. It was wide open, no lights, no movement. I crept toward it, stepping as quietly as possible. Inside, the cabin was trashed, drawers ripped out, mattress flipped, deep gouges along the walls as if someone dragged long nails across them. But the worst part was the message carved into the wood by the window. You never whistle back, not a warning. A complaint. He wanted me to. I backed out slowly, ready to run again, when I heard footsteps behind me. Not running, not sneaking. Slow, purposeful. I turned. He stood beneath the trees, closer than ever. Full moonlight exposed him. His skin was pale and stretched like it barely fit over bones. His eyes, if he had eyes, were just dark sockets. He stepped toward me, head tilting too far to one side. "Please," I whispered. "Just leave me alone." He stopped moving. Then softly, he whistled. One single note. I don't know why I did it. Maybe shock, maybe instinct. But I answered. I whistled back. The forest inhaled. He straightened slowly, as if rising to full height. His mouth, or what should have been a mouth, split into a long black line. He had been waiting for that. He moved faster than anything the tall should move. One moment at the tree line, next, inches from my face. I couldn't even scream. His voice wasn't a voice. It was air pushing through a hollow cavity. Now, we sing together. He leaned close. I felt cold fingers touch my throat. Then, a gunshot shattered the night. He recoiled, shrieking like the sound physically hurt him. The store clerk from town stood at the edge of the clearing with a shotgun. "Run," he yelled. I didn't look back. We tore through the woods, not stopping until we reached his truck. As we drove, he said only one sentence. "He follows those who answer." I moved out of the Appalachians the next day. But some nights, no matter where I am, even in cities, even surrounded by people, I hear it. Soft, slow, 3 notes. Whistle, whistle, whistle. He finally knows my whistle. He'll find me again. My sister Emily always said I was running from life, not toward anything. Maybe she was right. After my divorce, I needed silence. Somewhere no one knew me. Somewhere my phone didn't constantly vibrate. So when a friend offered his family's old cabin on Red Pine Ridge for the winter, I didn't hesitate. The cabin sat on an isolated stretch of mountain land in the Appalachians. The nearest neighbor was 15 miles away, and the closest town didn't even have cell phone service. On my first night, I sat near the wood stove and listened to the wind hiss between the pine trees. The mountains at night are a strange kind of quiet, alive, yet still. The cabin walls were thin, and I could hear every crack, every shift, every branch clacking against the tin roof. Then, something unexpected. Knock, knock, knock. 3 taps on the window behind me. I froze. Slowly, I turned my head toward the sound. The window was pitch black, no curtains, no reflection, just the dark outside pressing against the glass. I stood and approached carefully, telling myself it was a branch or settling frame. But when I reached the window and leaned forward, I saw something. A single fingerprint smear on the glass, from the outside. That was the first night someone, or something, knocked. The next morning, I went outside to check the window. The fingerprint was still there. Long, narrow, and smudged, like someone dragged it downward slowly. But that wasn't the part that made my stomach drop. Right beneath the window, where snow should have been untouched, the powder was disturbed. Not footprints, more like someone had been kneeling there. 2 deep impressions side by side, almost like knees. I scanned the woods, half expecting someone to be standing between the pines watching me. but nothing moved except the wind shaking clumps of snow off branches. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself it was a hunter passing through, maybe drunk or lost. Still, the idea made me uneasy. Why knock instead of calling for help? Why leave without saying anything? That night, I pushed the couch against the window. I stuffed blankets in the gaps. I wanted a barrier between me and whatever was outside. Around 2:17 a.m., the sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. This time, it wasn't gentle. It rattled the glass. I froze, holding my breath. Then a voice, barely audible through the glass, whispered, "I see you. I didn't sleep." I sat awake until the sun rose, clutching the fire poker like some kind of makeshift weapon. In daylight, the voice felt like a hallucination caused by exhaustion. I needed answers from someone who actually knew the area. In town, I stopped at a diner. The waitress, an older woman with steel gray hair, asked where I was staying. When I mentioned Red Pine Ridge, her expression hardened. "You up at the Lawson cabin?" I nodded. She leaned forward as if someone might overhear. "Don't open your windows at night. And don't talk to him." "Him who?" She ignored the question and slid me a napkin. On it was penciled a simple warning. "He learns your voice." Before I could press her, she walked away. Driving back to the cabin, I kept telling myself people in small towns love telling stories to scare outsiders. But that night, when I turned off the lights and sat listening, I realized how wrong I was. At exactly the same time as before, knock, 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 slow, patient. The knocking moved to the next window, then the next. He was circling the cabin. He knew I was inside. By the third night, I was running on caffeine and paranoia. I kept the lights off, sitting silently in the dark. No movement, no noise except the crackle of the fire. Then a soft tapping began, not on the window, on the front door. Tap, tap, tap. I forced myself toward it, each step feeling like walking into a nightmare. I looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just snow swirling under the porch light. I almost walked away, but then a fingernail scraped down the length of the door. Slow, long, intentional. My skin crawled. I grabbed the nearest thing that could be used as a weapon, an iron skillet, and shouted, "I'm armed. Go away." For a few blessed seconds, silence returned. I exhaled. Then a voice whispered through the doorframe cracks, closer, clearer. "Let me in." I stumbled back, nearly dropping the skillet. That voice was wrong. It sounded human, but there was no emotion, no breath, no tremor, like someone imitating a voice without knowing how. I backed into the bedroom and barricaded myself inside. He knocked on the window 5 minutes later. The knocking stopped at dawn. I packed my belongings and shoved them into my truck. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I needed to leave. But when I turned the ignition, the engine only clicked. Dead battery. Impossible. I drove the truck yesterday. I popped the hood. The battery cables were cut clean through, not chewed, not frayed, cut. My blood ran ice cold. Footprints circled the truck. Human footprints. Bare feet in the snow. He'd been waiting for me to try and leave. I sprinted inside, locked everything, and grabbed the landline phone that hung on the wall. Static, no dial tone. The cord had been sliced too. The sun dipped. Shadows lengthened. I built a fire, then grabbed a hunting knife from the drawer. Survival mode took over. If he came back, I'd face him. At 2:17 a.m., like clockwork, knock, knock, knock. But this time, it wasn't on the window. It was on the bedroom door, inside the cabin. My breath caught in my throat. The knocking continued slowly, patient, steady, like he was enjoying every second. I held the knife with shaking hands. "Leave me alone," I shouted. The knocking stopped. Silence swallowed the room. I edged toward the door, knife raised. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. With trembling fingers, I gripped the doorknob and yanked it open. No one was there, but on the hallway wall, traced in something dark, were smeared finger streaks. Not dripping, just smeared, like someone dragged wet hands down the wall. Then I saw something that made my stomach twist. The front door was wide open. Cold air rushed in, carrying snowflakes and pine needles. The wind howled like a warning. He was inside. I ran for the door and grabbed it, slamming it shut. When I turned around, I saw a movement from the corner of my eye. In the reflection of the window pane behind me, a figure stood in the hall, tall, motionless, not moving, not breathing, just watching. I bolted into the bathroom and locked the door, chest heaving. I slid into the bathtub, clutching the knife, trying to steady my breathing. Then I heard footsteps, slow, bare, dragging. They stopped right outside the bathroom. He didn't knock, he whispered, "You should have let me in the first night." My vision blurred. I thought I was going to pass out. He tried the doorknob gently, like testing a gift he wasn't sure how to unwrap. Click, click, click. I held the knife to my chest, whispering a prayer. Then, footsteps moved away. Silence returned. Minutes passed. Or hours. I couldn't tell. Finally, I pushed the door open. The house was empty, or so I thought, until I saw the message written across the big living room window, traced into the fog from his breath. Soon, I didn't wait for morning. I grabbed my backpack and stormed into the woods, following the road on foot. I walked for hours under the moonlight, breath-forming clouds in the freezing air. Around 5 a.m., headlights appeared. A sheriff's truck. I waved frantically, nearly collapsing as he stopped. He drove me straight to the station, gave me water, and listened calmly as I explained the knocking, the windows, the footprints, the whisper. He didn't laugh. He didn't interrupt. He finally said, "You're not the first." He pulled out an old file, photos of windows with smudged fingerprints, cabin doors covered in scratches, recordings of late-night knocking. We call him the window knocker. Shows up every winter, never breaks in, just watches until someone speaks to him. Once he hears your voice, he wants to hear it again. I swallowed hard. I spoke to him. The sheriff paled. "You need to leave the region." I was escorted back to the cabin to collect my belongings. The sun was rising, casting pale orange light over the ridge. The sheriff walked ahead of me toward the front door. "Just grab what you need fast," he said. As he opened the door, he froze, then slowly stepped back. Inside, on every window, written in breath condensation, "Hello again." The sheriff turned to me. "Don't go inside." "He knows you're leaving." I grabbed my bag from the porch and followed him back to the truck. We drove down the mountain without speaking. When we reached the main road, he pulled over. "If you hear knocking again, ignore it. No matter what, I left the Appalachians that same day, drove 8 hours straight, checked into a hotel, and collapsed onto the bed. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up. Not from a nightmare. From a sound. Knock, knock, knock. My blood froze. It came from the hotel window. No wind, no trees, no reason for someone to be outside on the 3rd floor. Then a whisper, muffled through the glass. "I found you." I didn't look. I didn't move. I just listened as the knocking continued, slow and patient. He doesn't want in. He wants me to answer. And I know. If I speak again, if I acknowledge him even once, he will never stop. My brain tried to rationalize the crying. Maybe someone fell, got hurt, needed help. That should have been enough to make me rush toward the sound. But something in my gut held me back. The sobbing echoed strangely, too clean, too close. Yet no direction made sense. It was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I called out, "Hello? Are you hurt?" Silence. Then, a shaky, broken exhale, like someone had been holding their breath right behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Just fog and trees, identical in every direction. I didn't realize until that moment that I was gripping the straps of my backpack so tight that my knuckles had turned white. I forced myself to keep walking. The crying started again, this time farther ahead, leading me, luring me. The switchbacks twisted endlessly, each turn revealing more fog, more wet leaves, and more silence. I reached a bent wooden trail sign nearly swallowed by vines. Someone had scratched deep marks into it, gouging the words, "Don't follow her fresh gouges," like they were made recently. The crying stopped instantly. I backed away slowly, heart pounding. Before I could decide what to do next, a soft whisper slid into my ear. So close, I felt the warmth of breath. "Don't leave me alone." My legs gave out. I've hiked trails all over Appalachia, but the Switchback Trail in southern West Virginia was supposed to be different. Isolated, steep, and rarely visited. Locals called it the Whisper Trail. When I asked why at a roadside gas station, an older man stocking coolers paused and said, "Son, that trail echoes what ain't there." I laughed at the superstition, but that night I couldn't stop thinking about it. Maybe that should have been my warning. The trail started peacefully enough. Early morning fog clung low to the ground, and the trees formed a kind of natural cathedral. The air smelled like pine, and a soft breeze carried the occasional shuffle of dry leaves. I walked for nearly an hour without seeing another soul. Exactly why I came here. But around the fourth switchback, the atmosphere shifted. The breeze died completely. The woods went unnaturally still. Even the insects fell silent. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the forest. A woman crying. It was faint at first, drifting between the trees, like someone desperately trying to stifle sobs. I froze mid-step. The crying continued, long, uneven, exhausted. I tried to call out, but my throat wouldn't open. Then, from deeper in the fog, a voice cracked through the forest. "Please, don't leave me here." I should have turned back. I don't remember falling. Only the cold sting of damp leaves against my palms. Panic ignited in my chest. But when I looked up, everything changed. The fog parted, and a figure stood in the bend of the trail. A woman. At least, I thought she was a woman. Her back faced me, shoulders trembling like she was crying into her hands. Her long black hair hung soaked and matted down her back, dripping onto a pale dress stained with mud. I swallowed and forced a steady tone. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Her sobbing stopped instantly. She didn't turn, didn't move, didn't breathe. The forest held its breath with her. Very slowly, her head twitched, not turned, just twitched toward me, like she was listening. I took a cautious step backward. The leaves beneath my boot crackled. Her head snapped toward me with an impossible, jerking motion, chin almost touching her shoulder. Her hair parted just enough for me to see one eye. It was completely black, not dark, black, the kind of void that absorbs light. She didn't blink, she didn't speak, she just stared. Then her mouth opened. Not in a scream, not in a cry, but in a perfect, silent, unbroken "oh." I ran. Branches tore at my jacket as I sprinted, lungs burning. The trail twisted, switchback after switchback, but something was wrong. Every turn looked identical. I knew I should eventually reach the sign again, or the parking area, but instead the fog thickened, swallowing everything. I stopped just long enough to catch my breath. Bad idea. A twig snapped behind me. I whipped around, expecting to see her, but the trail was empty. Only heavy fog and towering silhouettes of trees. Then far off, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They matched my breathing, like they were waiting. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I bolted downhill through underbrush, abandoning the trail, desperate to get away. My foot caught on a root and I tumbled, rolling down until I slammed into a fallen tree. Pain exploded across my shoulder. But what I saw when I lifted my head nearly stopped my heart. The trail sign. I had come full circle. The warning gouged into the woods seemed deeper now, almost fresh. Don't follow her. My breathing turned into short, frantic gasps. And then, over my left shoulder, came the whisper, so close it felt like it was coming from inside my ear. "Why are you running from me?" I stood perfectly still. The whisper wasn't trembling or sad anymore. It was calm, almost amused. The woods felt wrong. There was no wind, yet the branches swayed slightly, like something invisible moved through them. I forced myself to speak. "What do you want?" The answer came instantly. "Company." Her voice sounded closer now, but when I spun around, the trail behind me was empty. I moved quickly down the path, every nerve screaming. The crying returned, but this time it wasn't hers. It sounded like me, my own voice, mimicking my breathing, my sobbing. Then I felt a gentle touch on my lower back, like someone brushing dirt off my shirt. But I was alone. My body moved before my mind could decide. I broke into a full sprint again, turning sharply around a switchback, nearly falling. Just when I thought I lost her, a shape appeared on the trail ahead. She was standing directly in my path. Closer now. Her soaked hair clung to her face, hiding it. Her pale dress fluttered in the still air. She lifted her head slowly, and with a voice that sounded like several voices layered, she whispered, "Stay." I stumbled backward, but she mirrored my steps exactly, like a reflection. The forest around us darkened, even though it was still morning. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Please don't follow me," I said. She tilted her head, almost curious. Then her voice cracked into a horrible mimicry of my own. "Please don't follow me." Hearing my voice come out of her mouth broke whatever courage I had left. I ran. This time, I didn't care about the trail. I cut through brush, branches snapping, briars slicing my arms. The forest blurred around me as pure animal fear took over. But no matter how far I ran, the crying stayed directly behind me, like she was only inches away. When I burst into a clearing, I froze. It was a dead end. A cliff. Jagged rocks dropped into a ravine deep enough to swallow me whole. The wind howled upward, cold and merciless. Behind me, the crying stopped. I turned. She stood at the tree line, feet barely touching the ground. Her head tilted slowly. Then another voice, male, deeper, spoke through her. "You shouldn't have come alone." She stepped closer, feet gliding over the leaves without sound. Her hair parted enough for me to see her face in pieces, smears of mud, sunken skin, and those impossible black eyes. Not eyes, voids. Her whispers turned layered, overlapping like broken radio static. "Stay, stay, stay, don't leave me here." My mind cracked. I grabbed a fist-sized rock and hurled it. It went straight through her. She dissolved into fog, then appeared behind me. Her hand touched the back of my neck, freezing cold and impossibly heavy. My legs buckled. I felt myself being pulled toward the cliff, toward the drop, toward her. I screamed, clawing at the dirt, kicking, digging my heels into the rocks. Then, just as gravity shifted, a horn, distant, a car horn. Reality snapped back. The cliff blurred as I tore myself free, rolling onto the ground. The fog thinned just enough for me to see a faint trail leading downhill. She whispered behind me, not angry, pleading, "Don't leave me alone again." I ran. I stumbled down the hidden trail, branches slapping against my face. The crying followed, but grew more desperate, turning into choked screams. "Come back!" The wind roared through the trees like a warning. I could now see a sliver of asphalt through the fog, an overlooked parking area. I sprinted. My boots hit pavement, and I collapsed against the guardrail, gasping. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. The crying had stopped. A moment of silence. Then, footsteps. Behind me. Slow, deliberate, heavy. I turned around. Nothing. No woman. No fog. Just deep woods, silent and still. My car sat alone in the parking lot, covered in dew. I started it with shaking hands and sped down the mountain without looking back. But right before the first bend, my rearview mirror adjusted by itself. Not down, not sideways, up, pointed at the back seat. I didn't want to look, but I did. There was only darkness. Then the sound came, right behind my ear. I'm still here. For weeks, I barely slept. I jolted awake, hearing her crying in the walls, the hallway, the shower drain. I stopped hiking, stopped going near forests. Everything reminded me of her. I researched the switchback trail obsessively. The crying woman wasn't just a legend. She was a pattern. Missing hikers. Hikers found at the bottom of the ravine. Reports always said the same thing. They heard a woman crying. One article described the victims jumping off the cliff willingly. Another mentioned that some hikers had carved words into the trail sign, desperate to warn others. I remembered the clawed-out letters vividly. Don't follow her. The more I researched, the worse things became. Lights flickered, objects moved. I'd wake to my backpack sitting at the foot of my bed, like someone had placed it there. And sometimes, when I was half asleep, I felt a cold hand brush my shoulder. The same spot she touched on the trail. There was no escape. It's been 9 months. I moved states, changed jobs, deleted all hiking apps. I avoid forests, trails, even photos of mountains. But she didn't stay on Switchback Trail. She followed me. Some nights, I wake up to crying underneath my bed. Other nights, I hear footsteps pacing my hallway. Last week, I found wet footprints leading from my front door to my bedroom. And this morning, when I took a shower, there was a message written in the steam on the mirror. Don't leave me alone. Everyone thinks spirits haunt places. Not all of them do. Some haunt people. I don't know how she chose me. I don't know what she wants beyond company. But I do know something now. Something the hikers before me learned too late. The Switchback Trail doesn't lead anywhere. It brings something back. If you ever hike Appalachia and hear a woman crying, don't follow her voice. Because once you hear her, she hears you too. Last spring, I rented a secluded cabin deep in the Appalachian woods of eastern Kentucky. I needed silence. No neighbors, no traffic, no distractions. Just space to work and breathe. The Airbnb listing called it Cabin 23. a renovated old ranger station with mountain views and hiking trails right outside the door. The drive up the mountain was beautiful but unsettling. Thick trees formed a natural tunnel around the gravel road, and my cell signal vanished halfway up. When I finally reached the cabin, I expected peace. Instead, I found a note taped to the door. Lock every door and window before dark. Do not open the door after sunset, no matter who knocks. At first, I assumed it was some weird cabin rule or leftover prank by previous guests. But when I messaged the Airbnb host, 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. I explored the inside. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a fireplace, and large windows overlooking the woods. Cozy during the day. But as sunset bled into the treetops, the atmosphere shifted. Quiet, heavy, like the world outside was holding its breath. I double-checked every window and door, feeling ridiculous. By 10 p.m., I was in bed reading when... Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks. Deep, like something hitting the wood with its fist. My blood froze. The knocks didn't stop. I froze in bed, staring at the door. My mind raced. Maybe a hiker got lost, or it was a prank. But the sound wasn't random. Heavy, methodical, deliberate. It echoed through the walls of the small cabin, vibrating the wooden floor beneath me. I forced myself to peek through the curtains. Nothing. Just shadows of pine trees swaying in the wind. The full moon lit the ground, but the porch was empty. I whispered to myself, "Calm down. It's just the wind." The next knock, louder, closer. Then, something different. A voice. Low, hoarse, almost a whisper. "Open the door." My heart leaped. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over the rug. My hands shook as I double-checked the locks. Everything was secure. I ran to the fireplace and grabbed a poker, my mind screaming rational thoughts. Ghosts aren't real, right? But the knocks continued, this time from the back door. Slow, rhythmic, someone or something was circling the cabin. I retreated to the bedroom and sat against the wall, knees to chest. Every instinct screamed, run, but with my car 10 miles down the mountain, I was trapped. Then I heard it. Breathing. Outside the window. Close, heavy, watching. Minutes or hours passed. I couldn't tell. The breathing stayed. It moved from window to window, circling the cabin in a pattern. My phone was dead. No way to call for help. Then I saw movement. A figure outside the front window. Tall, thin, hunched, hands pressed against the glass. The face was obscured by shadows. I froze. My breath caught. I wanted to run, but curiosity, or terror, rooted me to the spot. The figure leaned forward, tilting its head in a slow, deliberate motion. A long, thin finger tapped the window. Tap, tap, tap. Then the eyes, not fully visible in the moonlight, yet unmistakable. Black voids, stretching unnaturally across the upper face, eyes that seemed too large, too consuming. I gasped. The figure recoiled, only to appear immediately at the side window. Every window I turned to, it appeared, as if it could bend space itself to stay in my line of sight. Then a voice, low, unhuman, rasping, "I know you're awake." I dropped the poker. My mind screamed for escape, but my body refused to move. I couldn't stay frozen forever. Trembling, I grabbed the poker again. Slowly, I approached the door. My hands shook uncontrollably. Then, the knock. Right behind me. Heavy. 3 deep raps against the bedroom door. I spun around. No one there, but the air felt colder, thicker, almost solid. I could hear a faint scraping along the floorboards. The figure appeared in the reflection of the bedroom window. Its eyes followed me. Its movements mirrored mine. I bolted to the back door, ripped it open, and swung the poker with all my strength. Nothing. Empty porch. The forest was still. Too still. Then a whisper from the darkness. "Don't leave." I stumbled backward. My mind raced. This was not human, not alive in any way I could comprehend. It wasn't just outside the cabin. It was in the cabin. Somewhere I couldn't see. The knocks resumed, this time louder, as if pounding the wood into splinters. My only thought, survive until morning. I barricaded myself in the bedroom with everything I could find. Mattress, chairs, dresser. Knocks still pounded relentlessly on every wall and window. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating. Then came the whispering. Multiple voices layered over each other, echoing, "I see you. You can't hide. You can't leave." The poker slipped from my hands. I felt something brush my ankle. Not lightly, heavy, pressing. I screamed and ran toward the fireplace, trying to ignite a log with trembling hands. Sparks flew, casting shadows that danced across the walls. The shadow outside reacted immediately, twisting and elongating in impossible ways, merging with darkness inside the cabin. My phone flickered to life for a split second, just enough to see it. In the reflection of the window, behind me, the figure was leaning toward me. Too close, breathing frost into the room. Then a new sound, a soft scraping, wet and deliberate. From the hallway, step by step, towards me. I understood then. It didn't just knock, it hunted. It learned, adapted, and waited for the right moment. Heart pounding, I seized a backpack, shoved essentials inside, and ran to the front door. The knocks escalated, pounding like a drum. I yanked the door open and bolted into the cold night air. Snow crunched beneath my boots. The forest seemed endless. The figure appeared, drifting between the trees, moving with unnatural speed. I reached the gravel road and started my car. The engine stalled. Dead battery. My hands shook as I pounded the dashboard. Then the figure was on the hood. Thin, elongated fingers pressed against the metal. Its face inches from the windshield. Black void eyes staring directly at me. I forced the engine to turn over and slammed the gas. Tires spun on gravel, spraying dirt and snow. It didn't move, just hovered there. I drove down the mountain, headlights cutting through thick fog, glancing constantly in the rear view. No figure visible, but I could hear faint knocks on the roof, fading into the distance as I descended. I didn't stop, not until I reached a town, civilization, and streetlights. I checked into a motel at the bottom of the mountain, locking every door and window. My hands shook so violently I could barely type. Hours passed. I thought I was safe, alone. Then the knocks began again, soft on the motel door. I froze, paralyzed by terror. The pattern was the same. 3 deliberate raps, pause, 3 more. I called the front desk. No one answered. I tried rationality. Maybe a prank? Someone testing me. But every hair on my body screamed otherwise. I listened, shaking, as a whisper floated under the door. "You can't hide. You belong to the cabin now." I spent the rest of the night crouched on the bed, wrapped in blankets, flashlight in hand, never sleeping. Every small sound echoed, footsteps in the hallway, doors creaking. By morning, the knocks had stopped. I left immediately, rented a car, and headed hundreds of miles away, vowing never to return. But I didn't realize until later, when I unpacked, that one of the fire pokers from the cabin was still in my backpack, covered in faint scratches. Weeks later, I still woke up at exactly 2:17 a.m. My dreams were haunted by knocking, by whispers, by black void eyes staring from corners. Sometimes, when I left my apartment, I felt a presence behind me, watching, stalking, following every turn. It didn't appear fully, but I could sense the weight, the cold, the anticipation. I even noticed scratches on my furniture, small, deliberate, like claws raking across wood. Friends dismissed it as stress, paranoia. But the knocking never left. Not in my dreams, not in my waking hours. I researched Cabin 23 online. Other guests reported the same thing: disappearances, frantic reviews describing black void eyes, unexplained knocks. No one survived more than a night without seeing it. And now I understood. Cabin 23 doesn't just haunt the woods. It haunts the people who enter. The figure doesn't need a body. It only needs attention, acknowledgement. And it follows relentlessly once it knows your voice. I thought I'd escaped, but one night I heard it again. A soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap on my window. I tried to ignore it. I covered my ears. Then the whisper. You left me. Alone. Again. It wasn't outside. It was inside. Every light flickered. The temperature dropped. Breath formed clouds in my apartment. I ran to the door, locked. Windows locked. It whispered again. The sound was layered, distant yet crushingly close. The air vibrated. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't breathe. And then it stopped. Silence. When I dared to look, I saw the scratches. Not on the furniture, on the walls. Words carved in the plaster. I will return. I moved again, farther this time. But Cabin 23 and its inhabitant had found a way into my life. Years have passed. I changed cities, states, even countries. But I still hear the knocks. Not every night. But always at 2:17 a.m., always 3 raps, always deliberate. I don't see it anymore, but I feel it. Cold air brushing my neck, soft footsteps when I'm alone. Whispered words that don't quite form sentences, but are unmistakably there. I have never told anyone the full story. Who would believe it? Cabin 23 is just a rental, just a story, just a forest. But it's not. It's patient. It learns. It waits. I never speak aloud when I hear the knock, never answer. Because the moment I do, Cabin 23 will find me again. And next time, there may be no escape. I've always been drawn to the abandoned places of Appalachia, the ones locals whisper about but never go near. That's how I found Hollow Creek, a valley carved deep between 2 ridges in eastern Tennessee, nearly impossible to access by car. According to the few who dared speak of it, the valley had once been home to a small mining town that burned down in the early 1900s. The people vanished. Not bodies, not graves. Just disappeared. Only the charred ruins and a single legend remained. They called it the Lantern, a glowing light that moves through the valley at night, appearing near the ruins. Some say it's a ghost. Others say it's something older, something that hunts curiosity like mine. I ignored the warnings. I parked my car near the overgrown trail, the sun already low in the sky, spilling golden light over the skeletal remains of foundations. The forest was thick and silent. Every step I took into the hollow made the air heavier, the shadows deeper. By twilight, I had reached the heart of the ruins. Charred beams jutted out of the ground like fingers. The wind whispered, but there was no wind. My flashlight picked up dust swirling in golden beams. And then I saw it. Faint at first, barely more than a glimmer, floating among the ruins. A lantern, hanging in the air, though no rope or tree held it. A pale yellow glow, swaying gently. It wasn't alive, but it watched. The story said anyone who follows the lantern alone never returns. Yet I couldn't look away. Something pulled me toward it, deeper into the hollow, away from the trail, away from any chance of safety. The lantern moved slowly, hovering above the rubble. Every instinct in my body screamed to stop, but my legs carried me forward. The deeper I went, the denser the fog became, curling around charred beams and rusted metal. I heard whispers in the fog. Not words, just breath, sighs, like hundreds of people exhaling all at once. My flashlight caught glimpses of shapes moving behind trees, but when I turned fully, nothing was there. Every step I took felt heavier, as if the forest itself was resisting me. I tripped over roots and debris, scraping my palms on stone and metal. The lantern hovered just ahead, guiding me into the very heart of the hollow. Then I heard it, a soft sobbing. Human, but twisted, echoing, almost metallic in tone. It was coming from beneath the lantern. I crouched behind a beam, trying to peer without being seen. A figure stepped from the fog, small, hunched, completely blackened as if charred like the ruins themselves. It held another lantern, but unlike the floating one, this one flickered violently, casting distorted shadows that writhed across the hollow. It didn't walk. It glided, leaving no footprints in the dirt. Its head twisted unnaturally, like it was trying to see everything at once. And then it spoke. A voice that shouldn't exist. Deep, hollow, yet painfully close. "You're not meant to see this." I froze. My lungs burned. The lantern in front of it hovered closer. My rational mind screamed to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't respond. I tried to back away, but my feet felt rooted. The fog thickened around me, cold and damp, curling around my ankles. The air smelled of ash and something else, metallic, like blood long dried. The lanterns floated silently in front of me, casting dancing shadows that seemed to stretch and reach for me. The small black figure moved closer, gliding without sound. I could now see its face, or rather, the lack of one. Charred, hollow sockets, blacker than any shadow. And yet, I felt eyes on me, a pressure in my skull that made it hard to breathe. I whispered, I don't want any trouble." The lantern swayed, and suddenly the fog rippled like water, revealing more figures, dozens of them, hunched and blackened, gliding silently between the ruins. Each held a lantern that flickered, illuminating partial faces, twisted, screaming expressions frozen in ash. The floating lantern that had drawn me here hovered higher, then began to drift deeper into the hollow. The black figures parted, as if clearing a path. I didn't have a choice. Something primal, instinctive, compelled me to follow. Each step I took echoed unnaturally, bouncing back to me in whispers. I could hear my own voice distorted, crying, laughing, begging. My pulse thundered in my ears. The deeper I moved, the more the lantern seemed alive, waving, teasing, always just out of reach. And then I tripped, falling face first into the dirt. When I lifted my head, the floating lantern was right above me. Its glow bathed my face in pale light. "Closer," the hollow whispered. Closer, or lost forever. I scrambled backward, trying to put space between myself and the lantern, but the figures were everywhere. They didn't walk. They moved like smoke, curling around charred beams, slipping through cracks in the ruins surrounding me. My hands shook so violently, I dropped the flashlight. I tried to crawl to the nearest solid foundation, but the fog thickened, blinding me. Then, cold. Ice-cold fingers brushed the back of my neck. I spun around. Nothing. The lantern hovered in front of me. I reached for it instinctively, even though my rational mind screamed no. The moment my fingers grazed the glow, 1,000 voices erupted in my head. Screams, sobs, whispers. Every sound of the hollow trapped in their lanterns. Pain, fear, regret, all of it. I stumbled backward, almost falling into a pile of ruins. My knees were scraped, my clothes soaked in dew. The black figure hovered closer. It tilted its head slowly, studying me. Then the whisper came. Not from the figure, but inside my head. Clear, unmistakable. Follow the light, or join them forever. I froze. The lantern floated deeper into the hollow, flickering like a heartbeat. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed to run. But the glow called me, and I could feel it pulling me, tethering my mind, dragging me into the heart of the valley. Somewhere in the distance, I heard a faint, echoing sound. The metallic clink of chains, a reminder that this hollow didn't release what it captured easily. I followed the lantern, my legs heavy and trembling. The hollow twisted unnaturally, like the forest itself was bending around me. Ruins that were once scattered now formed a labyrinth. Each step echoed, bouncing whispers in my ears. The lantern floated ahead, bobbing slightly, as if teasing me. Shadows of the black figures flickered along broken walls, their movements silent but deliberate. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the fog was playing tricks. Maybe my exhaustion had warped reality. But the lantern was tangible. Its glow heated my skin slightly, almost inviting me closer. Then I saw it. A pit. A hole in the ground, jagged rocks surrounding it, smoke curling from its depths. The floating lantern hovered above the edge, beckoning. I caught a faint glimpse of movement inside. Ashen hands clawed the walls, faces of the lost trapped in shadow. A cold dread gripped me. My pulse spiked. I tried to step back, but the black figures had formed a semicircle, blocking escape. They didn't move aggressively. They just watched. Their black eyes, or what should have been eyes, bore into me. The whisper returned, closer. Only the brave find the truth, I knew then. This was the heart of the hollow, and it would not let me leave without acknowledging it. I stared into the pit, my mind screaming to turn back. Every rational thought fled, replaced by a cold compulsion to step forward. The lantern bobbed gently above the edge, its light almost hypnotic. My legs moved on their own. I climbed down the jagged rocks, scraping my hands and knees, the air growing heavier with each step. The fog from above seemed to seep into the pit, clinging to my skin. I could hear whispering now. Not from a single voice, but hundreds, layered together. Pleas, cries, and faint laughter. Halfway down, I caught sight of shapes in the pit's darkness. Figures, not quite human, not quite shadow. Crawling, twisting, trapped in layers of blackened mist. They reached for the lantern, their elongated hands almost grazing it, but it hovered just out of reach. The black figure from above appeared at the edge, peering down. Its hollow eyes seemed impossibly large, fixed on me with intense focus. Then the voice, inside my head, louder, commanding, "Bring the light to them, or join them." I understood then. The hollow didn't just haunt the land, it collected the lost. Its lantern was a lure, and its shadows, the guardians. My pulse raced. Sweat poured down my face as I realized the gravity of the choice before me. I reached for the floating lantern. The moment my fingers brushed its surface, a wave of cold slammed into me. Faces swirled in the light, screaming silently, shadows writhing in impossible ways. The pit seemed to stretch forever, and I felt myself tipping toward it. I clutched the lantern with trembling hands. Its light pulsed like a heartbeat, illuminating the writhing forms below. I heard whispers layered over whispers, each one calling my name. My chest tightened. I wanted to drop it and run, but my body was frozen. The black figure hovered beside me, its head tilted in curiosity, as if observing a fragile human confronting a cosmic truth. I felt it studying me, not to attack, but to judge. The pit seemed endless, shadows stretching into infinity, alive and hungry. Suddenly, the lantern flickered violently. Faces in the pit pressed against the darkness, desperate to escape. I stumbled backward, losing my balance. For a terrifying moment, I teetered on the edge. One wrong step and I would join them forever. The whisper returned, calm yet insistent. You cannot turn away. You belong to the hollow if you do not accept it. I inhaled sharply and forced myself to take a step back. Slowly, deliberately, I raised the lantern and pointed it toward the swirling shadows. The figures recoiled as if repelled by its light. The fog began to thin, and the pit no longer seemed infinite. It was not a victory. Not yet. But for a brief moment, I had power. I realized the hollow's magic was not absolute. Its shadows were contained, tethered to the light. But only if one dared to face them. I scrambled up the jagged rocks, lantern in hand. Each step was a battle. My muscles screamed, the shadows stretched, curling around my feet, trying to slow me. I glanced back. The black figures recoiled from the lantern's light, but didn't vanish. They lingered at the edges, following my ascent with cold, deliberate patience. When I reached the top, I didn't stop. I bolted along the overgrown trail, lungs burning, flashlights swinging wildly. The hollow behind me seemed to stretch and twist with the shadows of the night. Trees bent unnaturally, roots snaking across the path. The lantern I carried pulsed in my grip, guiding me through the fog as if it knew the only way to survive was forward. I stumbled into the moonlit clearing near my car. Exhausted, shaking, I dropped to my knees, panting. The black figure hovered at the edge of the clearing, watching silently. Then, as if satisfied, it melted into the fog. The lantern in my hand flickered one last time, its glow fading into the darkness. I threw the lantern into the clearing. It extinguished immediately, leaving me alone in the silent forest. But the whispers remained, faint, echoing in the distance, reminding me the hollow never truly releases its visitors. I drove down the mountain in a daze, headlights cutting through thick fog, heart pounding in my chest. By the time I reached the first town, it was nearly dawn. Streetlights cast long shadows over empty streets. I stopped at a motel, double-locked the door, and collapsed on the bed. Sleep did not come. Every creak of the building, every rustle outside, felt like the hollow itself had followed me. I kept the lantern on the floor beside me, not lit, but its presence strangely comforting. Over the next days, I researched Hollow Creek. Old newspaper clippings confirmed the disappearances. Locals avoided the valley entirely, whispering about the lantern and the black figures. Some said the hollow was a curse. Others, an ancient entity that collected souls for reasons beyond comprehension. I began to notice subtle signs in my apartment. Shadows that lingered too long, whispers when I was alone. Fleeting glimpses of movement just out of sight. The hollow was not confined to the valley. Its reach extended through memory, attention, and fear. And yet, I could not stop thinking about the lantern. That glowing, floating light. A beacon in the abyss. Years later, I still dream of Hollow Creek. The lantern appears, glowing softly in the distance. I hear whispers calling my name, blackened figures gliding silently between charred ruins. My friends never understand why I avoid the mountains, why I never travel at night, why I sleep with lights on. Sometimes I think I see it outside my window, floating softly, pulsing. I blink, and it's gone. But the feeling remains. Watching. Waiting. The hollow never truly releases its visitors. I've never returned. I never will. But a part of me remains tethered to that pit, to that glowing lantern, to the whispering shadows. I wonder if anyone who enters will ever leave, or if the hollow grows hungrier with each curious soul. I do know one thing. The lantern in the hollow is patient. It waits, always. And one day, I may no longer resist its call. Until then, I warn anyone who will listen. If you see a floating lantern in the mountains, don't follow it. Don't approach the ruins, and never, ever step into the hollow. Because curiosity is a trap, and the hollow feeds on the lost. It was a cold October night when I found myself driving along Hollow Road in rural West Virginia. The locals avoided this stretch after dark, claiming strange occurrences and disappearances. But I had no choice. I was late returning from a research trip, and my GPS insisted this was the fastest route. The road was narrow, flanked by dense forest on both sides. Fog clung to the treetops, dripping onto the asphalt like a living thing. My headlights barely cut through the mist, and the engine's hum seemed deafening in the otherwise absolute silence. Somewhere far off, an owl hooted. A lonely, mournful sound that made the hair on my arms rise. About 30 minutes in, I noticed something strange. The fog seemed thicker ahead, glowing faintly under my headlights. At first, I thought it was the moon reflecting off moisture in the air. But then I saw it. A figure standing in the middle of the road. Tall, thin, draped in dark, tattered clothing that seemed to flow unnaturally. Its head tilted slightly, almost curious, almost beckoning. I slammed on the brakes. Tires skidded across wet asphalt, but the figure didn't flinch. My hands shook on the wheel. I tried to drive around it, but the road curved tightly, leaving no escape. The figure remained, perfectly centered, perfectly still. A low whisper drifted through the fog, barely audible but unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here." My rational mind screamed to turn around, to flee. But the engine stalled, dead. No matter what I tried, the car refused to start. I was trapped, alone, on Hollow Road. And whatever stood ahead was not human. I tried to stay calm, breathing heavily, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The figure didn't move, yet somehow it seemed closer with each heartbeat. My eyes darted, but the fog warped distances. The trees, the road, even the figure itself seemed to bend and stretch. Then a sound, a dragging, scraping noise from the asphalt. It was slow, deliberate, like something heavy being pulled. I couldn't see it clearly, but the whisper returned, louder this time. "You belong to the road." The figure stepped forward, gliding over the asphalt. Its movements were too smooth, too precise to be human. The tattered coat flared unnaturally, like smoke twisting in the wind. I realized with growing horror that it had no visible feet. It simply hovered, inch by inch, toward my car. Panic surged. I fumbled for the keys, slamming the ignition repeatedly. Nothing. The figure leaned closer to the windshield. Its face, or what I thought was a face, was pale, stretched, with eyes too dark, too deep. Its lips moved, but the whispering continued in my head, layering over my own thoughts, drowning out reason. I tried the horn. A long, piercing honk shattered the night. The figure recoiled slightly, but then raised a long, skeletal hand, and the sound abruptly cut off. Silence fell again, heavy, suffocating. Somehow, it knew I was human. Somehow it could manipulate my senses, warp the fog, warp the night itself. My chest burned. I realized the stories were not exaggeration. Hollow Road wasn't just a road, it was a trap. And I was caught. I pounded the steering wheel, my panic growing. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the engine remained dead. The fog thickened, rolling across the windshield like a living, breathing thing. Headlights barely penetrated it. My eyes darted frantically. There was no shoulder, no side path. Just black, suffocating trees and the figure slowly gliding closer. Then came another sound. Soft, almost imperceptible at first. A tapping like fingernails on glass, coming from every direction. The road seemed to bend, the asphalt stretching unnaturally beneath me. I realized I wasn't just trapped physically. The hollow road had a way of distorting time and space. Every turn looked the same, every tree identical. The figure hovered closer to the windshield, its dark eyes boring into me. I swear I saw the mist around it pulse with life, forming faint, twisting shapes. Faces, hands, screaming mouths, all reaching toward me. I tried to reason with myself. It must be some prank, some local weirdo or drunk. But the way it glided, the unnatural fog, the distortion, it didn't make sense. It wasn't human. A whisper crawled into my skull. Step out, or never leave. I froze, every nerve screaming. The world seemed to slow. My hands shook as I fumbled with the door handle. Every instinct told me not to open it, yet the figure's presence compelled me to obey. My reflection in the rearview mirror wavered, as though I were no longer fully in this reality. I opened the car door slowly, heart pounding like a drum. The night was silent, too silent, save for the faint whispering that seemed to emanate from the fog itself. My legs were stiff, almost unwilling to obey, but the figure hovered a mere foot away, its pale face inches from mine. A shiver ran down my spine. Its eyes, voids that seemed to swallow light, were fixed on me. The tattered coat rippled like smoke, yet it had no visible motion source. A cold gust blew, though the air was still, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves and decay. I took one trembling step out of the car. The asphalt beneath me felt alive, pulsing slightly, almost vibrating. Every instinct told me to run, but the figure's gaze held me like a vice. My reflection in the mist distorted, my face elongated, my eyes hollowing, as though the hollow road itself was trying to claim me. Then it spoke softly, voice barely audible. You came. Now you belong. The whisper wasn't just sound. It was in my mind, creeping under my skin, my vision blurred, fog curling into shapes that reached for me. The trees twisted unnaturally, creating a tunnel that led deeper into the endless night. I forced my legs to move. Following the curve of the road, my only thought, survive. But every step pulled me further from reality, deeper into the hollow. The deeper I walked, the more the hollow consumed me. Fog enveloped every tree, every rock, twisting the landscape into a nightmarish labyrinth. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, writhing like serpents across the road. The figure glided silently beside me, keeping pace without effort, its presence oppressive. Whispers layered over whispers. Names, warnings, laughter, crying, all fused into a dissonant, horrifying chorus. My head throbbed. My heartbeat synced with the pulsing mist. I stumbled over roots and broken branches, glancing behind. There was no end, no light except for faint moonbeams filtering through twisted treetops. And the figure never blinked, never wavered. I tried to call out, my voice cracking. Who are you? What do you want? The figure tilted its head. For a moment, the fog parted slightly. I glimpsed the road stretching endlessly, twisting impossibly, each turn identical to the last. It was as if the hollow road didn't want me to leave. A whisper again. The road takes, the road keeps. My pulse pounded in my ears. I realized then, this was not a place you could simply leave. You survived by obeying, by following the rules you could not see, by walking the path the hollow dictated. I had no choice but to continue. Every step forward was a gamble between survival and oblivion. The fog closed in around me like a living thing. Every step I took seemed heavier, the asphalt beneath my boots soft and yielding, almost breathing. My hands clutched my jacket tightly, sweat and chill mingling in a nauseating rhythm. The figure glided beside me, silent, unyielding, always just out of reach if I tried to glance directly at it. I tried to retrace my steps, but the road had shifted. Turns I remembered were gone, replaced by sharp curves and tree trunks that weren't there before. It was impossible to tell distance, direction, or even time. My phone, my GPS, everything electronic had died. No signal, no light. Only the figure and the oppressive fog pressing in from all sides. The whisper came again, louder this time in my head rather than the mist. The hollow chooses who leaves and who stays. I shivered, realizing I was not merely being observed. I was being tested. The road itself seemed alive, shaping and twisting around me, forcing me to confront the figure. Shadows stretched unnaturally, creating phantom limbs and ghostly faces that reached from the forest, grasping for me. My pulse raced, heart hammering so loud I could hear it echoing against the fog. Every instinct screamed to run. Every rational thought warned me to stop. But the hollow road had other plans. The figure moved ahead, turning slightly as if to beckon. Its hollow eyes promised a truth I wasn't ready to see, but that I couldn't resist. I stumbled forward, panic clawing at me with every step. The figure hovered silently, impossibly close now. Its tattered coat flared like smoke, rippling unnaturally. I could see the outline of its face, pale, elongated, void-like eyes staring into me as if reading every fear, every memory, every secret. Then the world shifted. Shadows seemed to detach from the trees, swirling around me like tendrils. Whispers escalated into a cacophony of voices screaming and pleading. The fog thickened so much that I could barely see the asphalt under my boots. I tried to shout, to demand it leave, but my voice was swallowed. The figure tilted its head, and in that instant, I felt it reach into my mind, into my very soul. Memories I had never spoken, fears I had buried, all were laid bare. "You cannot leave," it whispered inside my skull. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, the fog and whispers pressing tighter, the asphalt now squirming like living flesh. I understood then. The hollow road did not want me to escape. It wanted me to join it, to be part of its endless, twisting night. But something inside me refused. Summoning every ounce of courage, I staggered to my feet and began running. Not toward light, not toward safety, just forward, following some instinctive path through the mist. The figure glided behind me, silent, but its presence was a pressure in the air, a tangible weight on my back. I ran blindly, stumbling through fog and fallen branches. The forest on either side bent unnaturally, trees stretching and twisting as though alive. Every glance over my shoulder confirmed it. The figure followed without effort, floating silently, its eyes burning into me. The whispers escalated, voices merging into a single commanding tone. "Stop, or join us forever." I ignored it, sprinting forward, feet slipping across the wet leaves and asphalt. The hollow road warped beneath me. Curves turned back on themselves, trees loomed impossibly close, yet somehow I kept moving. My lungs burned, my heart threatened to explode, and still I could feel its gaze, relentless, patient, unyielding. Suddenly, moonlight broke through the mist, illuminating a faint path that hadn't been visible before. I sprinted toward it, praying it was not another trick. Behind me, the figure paused, as if deliberating, then glided after me again. I could feel the hollow stretching, testing me. Every instinct screamed terror, but some primal part of me, a part I didn't know existed, refused to succumb. And then I saw it, a faint glow, the end of the road, or perhaps just an illusion of safety. My hands shook violently as I ran toward it, barely daring to hope. I burst into a small clearing, the fog suddenly thinning. Moonlight shone down, revealing the road ending at a bend that seemed familiar, like a part of reality I recognized. I stumbled forward, gasping, barely able to catch my breath. The figure hovered at the edge of the fog, motionless. Its hollow eyes followed me. For a terrifying moment, I thought it would pursue me no further. The whispers diminished, but did not vanish entirely. They lingered in my skull like static, reminding me of what I had left behind. I ran the final stretch, emerging onto a well-lit country road. My car sat exactly where I had left it, engine cold. I climbed in, locked the doors, and drove without looking back. The fog remained behind me, but I could still feel its weight pressing against the night. Waiting, patient. Even hours later, in the safety of a motel far away, I could still see the figure's shadow at the edge of my vision. I swore I could hear the faint whisper, "We will wait." Weeks have passed, but Hollow Road remains in my mind. Every time I close my eyes, I see the figure hovering, its hollow eyes unblinking, the fog curling like fingers around the road. I avoid the mountains entirely, never drive at night, and still, the whispers follow me, faint, distant, but undeniably real. Friends ask why I'm jumpy, why I never go out after dark. I tell them nothing. They wouldn't understand. No one would. Hollow Road is not just a location. It is an entity, alive, patient, and hungry for the curious. Sometimes I dream of it. The figure gliding silently, the fog stretching infinitely, the whispers repeating, "You cannot leave. You belong to the road." I do not know if anyone who encounters it survives. I do know this. The Hollow Road waits, always. And if you ever find yourself driving through foggy Appalachian back roads at midnight, keep your eyes on the asphalt. Keep moving and never, ever follow the shadows. Because some roads do not lead home. They lead into the hollow. The road to Widow's Peak was narrower than I had imagined, winding through dense Appalachian forests where sunlight barely touched the ground. I had rented the small, isolated cabin to get away from city life, needing solitude to write my book. But as the car climbed higher, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold October air. Twisting branches scratched against the sides of my car, leaves crunching under tires in eerie echoes. Every now and then, I caught a flash of something in the trees, movement that stopped when I blinked. My rational mind dismissed it as deer, shadows, or tricks of the fading light. But an inexplicable sense of unease settled over me. By the time I reached the cabin, dusk had fallen. Widow's Peak loomed above, jagged and dark against the crimson horizon. The cabin itself was small, rustic, and weathered, perched precariously on the edge of a steep cliff. The porch creaked under my weight as I stepped out, and the surrounding forest was quiet, unnaturally quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant sounds of wildlife. only the wind whispering through skeletal branches, carrying a faint, metallic tang I couldn't place. I unlocked the door, stepping inside. The air was cold, musty, and carried a faint scent of wood smoke. Like someone had lit a fire recently, though the cabin had been empty for years. Shadows filled every corner, twisting oddly in the flickering light of my flashlight. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just isolation, fatigue. But the instant I closed the door behind me, I heard it. A faint thud above me, as if footsteps had crossed the attic floor. I froze. The cabin had only been empty for a long time, and the keys were in my hand. A whisper followed, soft and almost mocking. "You shouldn't be here." Not yet. I spent the first night uneasily awake, flashlight in hand. Every sound seemed amplified in the silence. The creak of the floorboards, the scratching of tree branches against the siding, the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. But there was something else. Faint tapping, almost like fingernails, coming from upstairs. I tried to convince myself it was the cabin settling, or perhaps an animal. Yet the taps were too rhythmic, deliberate. A shiver ran down my spine. My eyes darted around the dimly lit room. Shadows seemed to stretch longer than physics allowed, twisting unnaturally against the walls. Eventually, I drifted into uneasy sleep, only to be awakened hours later by a low, guttural sound, something between a whisper and a growl, emanating from the attic. My heart raced. I didn't want to investigate, but curiosity gnawed at me, tethering me to the cabin. With trembling hands, I grabbed a flashlight and slowly climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. The door was closed, but the handle felt warm, almost pulsing under my touch. I paused, listening. The sound had stopped. I pushed the door open. The attic was empty, or so it seemed. Dust motes floated in the weak flashlight beam. No footprints, no movement, just silence. Then I noticed it. Scratch marks along the wooden floor, fresh, jagged, pointing toward the far corner. And in that corner, a faint, shadowy shape seemed to pulse with the light. I blinked, and it was gone. The whisper returned, sharper this time, as if right behind me. "You can't leave?" Not now. The next morning, I barely slept. Every creak, every rustle in the cabin made me jump. I told myself to leave, to drive down the mountain and escape. But something held me back. A compulsion I couldn't explain. By afternoon, I ventured outside. The forest around the cabin was dense, oppressive. Trees leaned unnaturally, shadows twisting as though alive. I thought I saw a figure moving between the trees, pale, indistinct, vanishing whenever I tried to focus. Night fell again quickly, faster than normal. By 10 p.m., I was trapped inside, the wind howling like something alive. I was preparing for bed when I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving along the floor above. The attic. I grabbed a flashlight and a kitchen knife, climbing the stairs cautiously. My pulse pounded in my ears. The steps stopped as I reached the attic door. I could feel a presence beyond it, pressing against the thin wood. My breath caught. I pushed the door open slowly. The attic was empty, but the air was thick, suffocating. Then I saw it. A dark humanoid silhouette crouched in the corner, taller than any normal person, with elongated limbs. Its head tilted unnaturally. Black, hollow eyes stared directly at me. I froze, knife shaking in my hand. The figure whispered, "No." The voice slithered into my mind. "Leave, and you will never know peace." I stumbled backward, tripping over a crate. The figure didn't move, yet I could feel it advancing, Inch by inch, its presence swallowing the light from my flashlight. My chest burned. The attic felt smaller, suffocating. For the first time, I understood the warnings about Widow's Peak. This was no ordinary cabin. Something ancient, patient, and hungry had made its home here. And I had wandered directly into its grasp. After the attic encounter, sleep was impossible. Every shadow seemed alive. Every gust of wind whispered my name. Even the wooden walls of the cabin felt sentient, creaking as if breathing, stretching, and shifting subtly when I wasn't looking. I realized with growing dread that the cabin itself was aware of me. That night, I tried to leave. I drove down the winding road toward the valley below, but the forest seemed endless. Trees bent inward, branches forming dark arches above the road. The headlights caught glimpses of movement between trunks, figures pale and elongated, vanishing when I blinked. When I returned, my car inexplicably out of fuel. I knew I was trapped. Every instinct screamed terror, yet I couldn't leave. It was as if the cabin had become a magnet, holding me in place. Inside, the shadows shifted again. I caught glimpses of figures standing just out of reach in the corners of my vision. They were always still when I looked directly at them, yet when I turned away, they moved closer. I began speaking aloud, trying to rationalize the situation, but even my voice sounded hollow in the oppressive air. And then I heard the whisper again, more insistent. "You are ours now. The peak watches all." I realized that whatever haunted the cabin didn't only occupy space, it occupied perception, bending reality and twisting fear into a physical presence. The walls pressed closer at times. The floor groaned as if breathing, and I had to remind myself I was not already inside some endless trap. Though every fiber of my being feared I was. By the fifth night, I felt the presence more than I saw it. The floorboards creaked overhead, even when no one was up there. Sometimes I woke to scratching at the windows, faint whispering under the wind. One night, I climbed the stairs again, flashlight in hand, trembling. The attic was empty, or so it seemed. Then I heard it. A slow, deliberate scraping across the wooden floor, approaching. I froze. The air grew cold, frost forming on my cheeks. The shadow in the corner stretched and wriggled like a living thing, elongating unnaturally. My chest tightened as the whisper slithered inside my head. "Do not resist." I backed toward the door, slipping on dust and debris. The figure remained crouched in the corner, but I could feel it moving closer, folding reality around it. My mind screamed at me to flee, to escape. But every exit seemed to shift, every doorway bending as if mocking me. I stumbled outside, into the forest behind the cabin. The trees twisted into impossible shapes. Branches reached for me like fingers. And then I saw them. Figures emerging from the fog. Pale, faceless, all observing, following silently. The cabin loomed behind me like a sentinel, dark windows staring. I knew then that leaving the property didn't mean leaving the peak. The forest, the cabin, the peak itself. All were alive, all were aware, and all were waiting. Days blended into nights. I stayed mostly inside, pacing, trying to convince myself I could survive until dawn. But the shadows never left. Every flicker of candlelight, every swing of lantern revealed figures I hadn't seen before, stretching across walls, crouched in corners, sometimes whispering faintly, almost incomprehensibly. I began hearing my own name, as if the peak knew me, remembered me, claimed me. Sleep brought visions of the peak itself, bending, twisting into impossible shapes, cliffs spiraling endlessly into darkness, trees reaching like arms to snatch me back. The whispers became louder, layered, insistent. Join us, forever. I realized the attic figure wasn't alone. It was a sentinel, a guardian of some hidden truth. And the cabin, the forest, the peak itself were vessels, feeding off fear, curiosity, and those who wandered too close. One night, drawn by a sound I couldn't resist, I went to the attic. Shadows writhed around me like living fog. The figure emerged fully this time, taller, limbs longer, and eyes, if you could call them that. Hollow voids absorbing all light. It whispered my name directly into my mind. You belong here now. The peak chooses. I felt a force pulling me toward the corner, toward the figure, toward the darkness. My knife felt useless, my voice meaningless. I understood the peak was patient. It did not need to kill quickly. It only needed to wait until fear surrendered. By the seventh night, I could no longer tell reality from illusion. The cabin shifted around me. Hallways lengthened, stairs looped, and the windows reflected scenes I didn't recognize. Cliffs folding into themselves, forests bending into the sky. The shadow figure in the attic now seemed to multiply. Mirrored versions along walls, corners, even in reflections. I couldn't look directly without feeling my mind fray. The whispers escalated. The peak takes. The peak keeps. I fled the cabin in the dead of night, desperate for any escape, lantern in hand. Outside, the forest had warped completely. Trees reached impossibly high, twisting over the road like arches. Figures emerged silently from the mist, faceless, pale, limbs elongated. I ran blindly, following a path that seemed both forward and back at the same time. At a clearing near the cliff's edge, I saw it. A glowing light hovering above the peak, pulsing. Drawn to it, I realized the figure's whispers had lured me here. A terrible understanding washed over me. The peak was a nexus, a living entity feeding on the fear and curiosity of trespassers. I stumbled backward, falling to my knees. The shadows advanced, reaching, pressing, pushing me toward the edge. I clawed my way to the edge, my hands raw on jagged rock. The glowing light intensified, revealing the full horror. The shadow figure now seemed to encompass the entire clearing, stretching impossibly tall, blending with the mist. Its voice thundered in my mind. There is no escape, only surrender. I screamed, my voice swallowed by the wind, the forest, the peak. My body shook violently. Instinctively, I raised my knife, but it dissolved in the mist as if it had never existed. The shadows writhed and formed a vortex of black tendrils, attempting to draw me in. Then a thought struck me. Perhaps the peak's power relied on fear. I forced my eyes open, looked directly at the figure, and refused to flinch. The wind roared, the shadows quivered, and for a terrifying heartbeat, the figure hesitated. I didn't wait. Using every ounce of strength, I scrambled away, heading down the mountain trail, lungs burning, hands gripping roots and rocks. The shadows pulsed and lunged, but the peak allowed me to escape. For now, I reached the base of the mountain, trembling, soaked with sweat, mud, and fear. The forest behind me stretched endlessly, black and silent. For a moment, I thought I had escaped Widow's Peak. Back in town, I tried to explain what had happened. Locals nodded grimly, refusing to ask questions. They knew. Everyone who ventured to the cabin sensed the peak's presence. They called it cursed, haunted, alive. But no one could intervene. The peak didn't allow interference. I rented a motel for the night. Even there, shadows seemed longer than normal. Every flicker of light felt like a reflection of the peak's influence. Every whisper a reminder that the cabin still watched, still waited. I realized my escape was temporary. The peak was patient. Even months later, I dream of the glowing light, the shadows writhing, and the hollow voice repeating, "We wait." Always. Years later, I have avoided mountains entirely. The cabin on Widow's Peak is a permanent scar in my memory. Every time I close my eyes, I see the shadow figure, the twisting forest, the glowing light, the peak itself bending impossibly in the night. Sometimes, in dreams, I hear the whispers. "You belong." The peak chooses. Even in the safety of my home, I feel the peak watching, waiting. I've never returned, and I never will. But I know it waits for the next curious traveler, the next soul drawn to the cabin, the peak, and the whispers in the wind. The lesson is simple. Some places are alive, some roads are traps, and some cabins are not merely buildings. They are sentient, patient predators. If you ever find yourself driving through Appalachian backroads, heading for a secluded cabin on a mountain peak, remember Widow's Peak. Turn back, walk away, and never, ever enter the cabin. Because curiosity feeds the peak, and those who ignore its warning are never seen again. I had always been drawn to abandoned places. When I heard about the forgotten mines of Black Hollow, deep in the Appalachian backwoods, I couldn't resist. Local legends called it cursed, a site where miners vanished and ghostly sounds echoed through the tunnels. Rationally, I knew it was just stories, but my curiosity was stronger than fear. The road into Black Hollow was barely passable, overgrown with weeds and fallen branches. As I drove, the sun dipped behind the ridges, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for my car. The air was thick, damp, carrying the faint metallic scent of iron and decay. Every mile closer, the atmosphere grew heavier, oppressive, like the forest itself was warning me to turn back. By twilight, I arrived at the mine entrance. A gaping maw carved into the mountainside, wooden beams rotting, warning signs half buried in mud. The smell hit me immediately. Wet earth, rust, and something acrid I couldn't place. A faint wind blew from the mine, carrying a whisper of voices, faint but unmistakable. I parked, grabbed my flashlight and backpack, and stepped forward. The ground underfoot was unstable, gravel crunching sharply in the silence. The entrance seemed to inhale, drawing me inside. Shadows twisted along the wooden supports, flickering unnaturally in my flashlight's beam. I shook off the chill crawling up my spine, convincing myself it was just nerves. And then I heard it. A faint, rhythmic tapping, echoing from deep within the tunnels. Footsteps? Dripping water? My heart hammered as the sound repeated, slow, deliberate, and oddly alive. A whisper followed, soft and almost mocking. "Why have you come here, where the hollow keeps its secrets?" I froze. The mine was calling me, daring me to step further into darkness. And step I did. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became. My flashlight flickered across the jagged walls, revealing old mining tools rusted and half buried in dirt. Every step echoed ominously, bouncing back from the tunnels as if the walls themselves were alive. The rhythmic tapping continued, sometimes behind me, sometimes ahead. Yet I could never pinpoint its source. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, forming small puddles that reflected my flashlight beam like eyes watching me. Shadows lengthened and twisted unnaturally, occasionally forming human-like shapes that vanished the moment I focused on them. I paused to catch my breath, leaning against a wooden support. That's when I noticed something carved into the walls, Names, dates, frantic scratches that looked like claw marks. Some were centuries old, some recent. My stomach churned. I wasn't the first to wander in, and the ones who came before had never left. Then a low growl echoed from deep inside, vibrating through the rock beneath my feet. I froze, straining to see, but the flashlight barely penetrated the darkness ahead. The whisper returned, closer this time. "You shouldn't be here. Not yet." I tried to rationalize. Cave-ins, animals, echoes. But the sound had intent. There was something alive in the mines, watching, waiting, patient. My pulse raced. Every instinct screamed to leave. Yet I had to know, had to see what the hollow hid in its depths. The tunnels narrowed as I pressed deeper. My flashlight caught glimpses of abandoned miners' helmets, rusted pickaxes, and wooden carts tipped over long ago. Names and dates scratched into the walls stared back at me. Some recent, some decades old. Each one felt like a warning. The hollow doesn't forget its victims. A sudden draft made my hair stand on end, carrying a metallic tang and whispers that weren't carried by the wind. They seemed to originate from the walls themselves. My heart pounded as I realized the tapping had stopped. In its place, I heard breathing. Slow, deliberate, close. I turned a corner and froze. The tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber, and on the walls were handprints, hundreds of them, dark, smudged, claw-like. Some were high, some low, like adults and children, all pressing desperately against stone. And beneath them, the floor bore indentations of footprints leading toward the darkness at the chamber's center. A shadow flickered across the far wall. My pulse skyrocketed. The air grew colder. Then I felt it. A presence, massive, almost pressing against my chest, its weight impossible yet undeniable. I whispered to myself, trying to rationalize, but deep down, I knew there was intelligence there, a consciousness drawn to intruders like me. And then the whisper arrived again, low and omnipresent. "You were warned, yet you came." The shadows in the chamber twisted, forming humanoid shapes. Faces I could not fully see seemed to watch, observe, and judge. And from the deepest corner of the cavern, I felt eyes boring into me. Patient, hungry, and eternal, the shadows moved. Not slowly, not like wind. They advanced with purpose. I tried to backtrack, but the tunnels seemed to stretch endlessly behind me, corridors bending impossibly. Panic clawed at my chest. My flashlight flickered, then went out, leaving me in near total darkness. I groped along the walls, hearing whispers everywhere, overlapping and cacophonous. "Join us. Stay forever. Don't leave." A faint red glow appeared in the center of the chamber, pulsing rhythmically. I followed it reluctantly, drawn against my better judgment. The floor beneath me seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat, every step echoing unnaturally. Then I saw it. A figure, tall and elongated, eyes hollow, limbs unnaturally long. It moved smoothly, silently, merging with the shadows, yet commanding the cavern. It raised a hand toward me, and I felt a cold pressure in my chest, as if my body recognized it. I stumbled backward, clutching my chest, gasping. The shadows thickened around me, twisting into humanoid forms, some humanoid, some impossible. The whispering escalated. The hollow remembers. It keeps. I realized that the figure wasn't alone. It was the sentinel of the mine, a creature born of fear, patience, and darkness. It didn't need to attack me. It simply existed, bending reality and perception, making the mine itself a predator. The mine seemed to close around me. Walls pressed inward, ceilings dropping, shadows stretching impossibly long. The air grew thick and metallic, every breath burning my lungs. I could hear whispers all around me, unintelligible but insistent. I tried to run, but every tunnel looped back. Every passage led to another cavern, another chamber. I began to doubt whether there was a real exit. Panic overwhelmed logic. I screamed, but the cavern swallowed the sound. Footsteps echoed behind me. Slow, deliberate. I spun, flashlight still flickering, and saw a wall of shadows advancing. Faces twisted in agony emerged from the darkness, hands reaching, clawing. I stumbled into a narrow shaft, pressing against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. The figure appeared again, closer than before, its hollow eyes boring into me. A single thought echoed in my mind. You belong here. I forced myself forward, crawling through narrow tunnels, trying to ignore the whispers promising death, eternal imprisonment, and madness. But the hollow's presence was everywhere. Every shadow, every wall, every floorboard seemed alive, and I could feel it studying me, testing me, learning my fear. I reached a cavern larger than any I had imagined, ceiling high, walls slick with moisture. The figure emerged fully, standing tall, limbs long and unnatural, eyes like black voids absorbing light. Its presence radiated cold, dread, and inevitability. It didn't speak aloud. The whisper, now in my mind, resonated with terrifying clarity. All who wander into the hollow are remembered. All who resist are claimed. The floor trembled as shadows writhed around me, merging into a vortex of shapes. Faces of past victims flickered in the walls. Their mouths opened silently in eternal screams. The figure raised a hand, and I felt a force, intangible yet suffocating, pushing me toward the center of the cavern. I realized I was trapped between the figure and the shadows. The red glow intensified, reflecting off the damp walls, casting grotesque, shifting shapes. Every instinct screamed for flight, but my body felt rooted, bound by unseen hands. Desperation fueled me. I tore away from the center, scrambling through tunnels, every step echoing like thunder. The shadows followed, crawling along walls, creeping through cracks, relentless. The figure floated behind, silent but overwhelming. A predator unconcerned with haste. The mind twisted impossibly, tunnels folding into themselves, creating loops and dead ends. I had no sense of direction. The whispers escalated. There is no leaving, only surrender, only the hollow. I stumbled into a narrow passage, slamming against the walls. The shadows lunged, but I ducked, crawling through a tiny crevice. Behind me, the entity's hollow eyes reflected the faint light of my flashlight, patient and unrelenting. I realized something. The hollow's power was tied to fear. I had to fight it, at least a little, to survive. I ran forward blindly, ignoring the whispers, refusing to flinch, praying for an exit. After what felt like hours, I glimpsed a faint light, a sliver of the outside world through a collapsed shaft. Adrenaline surged as I scrambled toward it, ignoring the whispers, the shadows, and the suffocating air. The figure advanced toward me slowly, deliberately, and I realized the hollow could reach me anywhere in the mine. I pushed harder, hands bloody from the rocks, feet slipping on mud. The light grew stronger. Finally, I burst through the opening, collapsing onto the forest floor outside. The fresh mountain air filled my lungs. The hollow did not follow, but the shadows lingered near the entrance, watching, waiting. I staggered back to my car, chest heaving, hands trembling. The mine loomed behind me, silent, patient, eternal. I drove for miles, heart hammering, refusing to glance back. Black Hollow receded into the distance, but I could still feel its gaze. Even days later, dreams of tunnels, shadows, and hollow eyes haunted me. Locals warned me never to return. They spoke of miners lost, travelers who vanished, and a presence that waits, patient and eternal. The hollow remembers, and it claims. Even in safety, I feel its influence. Shadows stretching in my peripheral vision, whispers carried by the wind, and dreams replaying the minds endlessly. I survived, but the hollow marked me. Years later, the mines of Black Hollow are etched in my memory. I never returned, but I sometimes dream of them. The tunnels folding, shadows crawling, the elongated figure watching. I hear whispers at night, faint, insistent. We remember. We wait. You are ours in memory. The hollow is patient. It does not need to act quickly. It waits for curiosity to lead the next victim, for fear to bind them in its labyrinth of stone and shadow. If you ever hear the tales of Black Hollow, heed them. Do not seek the mines. Do not enter. Curiosity feeds the hollow, and those who wander too far are never seen again. The hollow is eternal, and I am haunted as the shadows of Appalachia fade behind us. Remember, these tales are not just stories. They are warnings whispered through the wind, echoes of those who ventured too far, and glimpses of the unknown that still lingers in the forests, peaks, and mines. The creatures, the whispers, the abandoned cabins and mines, they may seem distant, but curiosity can draw anyone into the darkness. Keep your eyes open on lonely roads, trust the stories, and never ignore the signs. If tonight's journeys through Widow's Peak, Black Hollow, and the haunted hollows of Appalachia left your heart racing, know that the horrors are still out there, waiting. Thank you for joining me on 10 new most disturbing true Appalachia horror stories. Don't let the fear fade. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which story chilled you the most? Have you ever experienced something unexplainable in the woods or mountains? Subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new tale of terror. And remember, the shadows are always watching.